Welcome to the Coastside Fire Protection District Board of Directors Special Board Meeting, December 15, 2021. Roll call, please, Melissa.
Yes, President Burke,
Yes.
Vice President Cockrell,
Here.
Director McKimmey, we're waiting for, Director Stockman,
Present.
and Director Cheryl.
Here.
All right. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'd open the meeting to any members of the public who would like to make comments. Are there anybody waiting, Chief Cox?
The only member of the public I think I saw in here was Michelle Dragony, but I don't know if she has any comments. Michelle?
So no member wishes to speak. With
That's
that,
correct.
I'll close the meeting for public comment and move on to the consent calendar. And Melissa, Director McKinney will recuse himself from the consent calendar. With that, do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Moved and second. Roll call, please. Melissa.
Yes, sorry, bear with me here.
Sure, that's fine.
Director Cheryl,
Yes.
Director Stockman,
Yes.
Vice President Cockrell,
Yes.
and President Burke.
Did we get all? I didn't hear me, but
President Burke.
yes, I approve.
Okay.
Very good. Let's see, is Bruce on yet?
He is just asking for his invite to be sent to another address. I'm going to do that right now.
I'd like to make sure that he's on before we go any further. I'll tell you what, let's do this. If there is no objection from the board members, what I'd like to do is change the order of our agenda this evening and move on to item 7, which is the new business. If there's no objection to that, I will do that, but I'll still wait for Bruce. Well, let me do this. If you agree that we're going to move on to the item 7, new business, election of officers and committee members, let me point out to the board that under the committees that are listed there, B through G, there's a little bit of a difference in what we've been having recently. The existing committees that we have now are finance, the volunteer liaison, land and structures, vegetation management, the special districts, the ALS, SPA, emergency response, and CERT. Those are the committees we have currently in action and have committee members manning each of those positions. And I would like to make a motion that we keep those same committees and keep the same representatives on those committees for this time. And at any point in the future, if any board member wishes to change committees or form a new committee, they could do so. But I would recommend we stay with these same committees without going through the necessary vote on each one of them. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any comment? Anybody was?
Bruce.
Yeah.
Excuse
Bruce,
me?
you muted.
Does anybody have any comment on staying
Yeah,
with the
I
same
do,
committees with the same people?
I do, Gary. board positions and committee positions, and more importantly, maybe liaison also. I do think this board functions very well. And I think as far as committee makeup, I think especially as it relates to land and structures, I think JB and Bruce are the best people in those positions to move forward, especially with our goal of building 44. I think Cynthia and I are working very well as a vegetation management committee, and especially moving forward with this new El Granada project and the oversight of that it's essential we stay on that committee at this time. The liaison positions I feel less strongly about. I think in a lot of ways that the right people are in the right position and it helps the board function. But for the overall health of the board, not just this board, but future boards that will not be made up of us, I think it's somewhat a bad practice, because I don't think it makes us diverse. I don't think it gives us a broader understanding of the whole workings of the district. I think it would be a benefit, and I think it's a normal practice in other boards to have more rotation, not just for ourselves, but also the community in which we interact with, right? I think if I'll use emergency preparedness as an example, is that I've become the face of the district that in a way, because I've been doing that for over 4 years. But I think it would be better if it rotated. So that's my opinion. I'm not asking action on that specifically. And I think the same way for the board positions. And frankly, Gary, I don't think the board would function as well without you in the leadership role. I would never vote for that to be different, because I think it's crucial for the health of it. But in the future, and I think we lack, I don't want to get too much depth in this. So that's my, I'm okay with it staying the way it is, but I think we need to think of how well, if the board could function better if we moved more. I do have some suggestions for the liaison positions. I think now with Cynthia on board, that's one meeting that she always attended in her CERT presence. I spoke to her earlier today, her willingness to take that liaison position on solely. And I do think that we need, from the fiduciary point, financial with you, I think it would be good start for her. I think that's her strength. If she sat on that committee with you, those are the two things that I would like. I'm willing to do any of those other positions if I give up the emergency preparedness one. And I also bring this up, and I want to be honest from the start, is in this next term, I think both myself and Cynthia are up for the re-election positions, the two of the 5 members.
As is President Burke.
Is President Burke also?
Yes.
Okay, then the 3 of us. My intention at this point, I'd like to say, is I don't plan on running for the next term. So some of this is with that knowledge and wanting the board to be in the best position if I'm no longer serving. And so some of this comes from that understanding of how that will shift within the board. I know the board's more than resilient enough that my presence or lack of presence isn't going to affect that, its ability to do it well. But I think it's part of a planning and looking forward. So with that, that's my only comments, and I appreciate your listening.
Yeah. Any other board members' comments? Look, I guess, Steve, your points are well taken. I don't disagree with that. I guess the only comment I would add to it, we're going to be going through a rather very busy year, particularly with redistricting. And as you mentioned, there's going to be a number of changes probably, I just assume, on the board that we're dealing with, and clearly some other issues having to do with Station 44 and so forth. I think my suggestion, I guess, is with the pending changes for the year, I would suggest that we stay with these committees at this point. If you or any other board member would like to revisit this, I would be very happy, I'm sure, to put it back on the board with more depth to go over it. But for the moment, I would like to leave it as it is, fully understanding the points you make.
I'm comfortable with that, President Berg. Thank you.
Then we have a motion and a second, I believe, to leave the committees as is. Roll call, please. Melissa.
Yes, Director Cheryl,
Yes.
Director Stockman,
Yes.
Director McKimmy,
Bruce, you're muted.
Yeah, yes.
Vice President Cockrell,
Yes.
and President Burke.
Yes. Now, moving on to the election of board officers. And let's see, we have the president, vice president, and I believe that's it. Secretary is Chief Cox, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct? Chief Cox? I think that's correct. First of all, then do I have a motion for the president of the board?
Make a motion that we leave it just as it is.
I second it.
Question to Bruce. Are you suggesting we leave everything as it is?
Yes,
Okay,
it's working. It's working quite well.
I can second that.
President Burke, just one note on that. The only reason I'm the secretary is because Director McShane was the secretary during the year and she left.
Good.
Is what resulted in me becoming secretary.
Thank you. Good point. Bruce, you made a suggestion to leave it as it is. And could I ask you to amend that we elect a new secretary?
Yes, so my amendment is as follows, that we elect a new secretary to give Jonathan a break.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Director Cheryl,
Yes.
Director Stockman,
Yes.
Director McKimmy,
Yes,
Vice President Cockrell,
Yes.
President Burke.
Yes. Do I have a motion for a new secretary?
I have a question first before you ask for nominations. Is there anyone on the board that would like to be the secretary? Is anyone that you ask me to do it? I don't have the skills to do it. But I'm sure
My
there
screen just went blank.
there are other people here that do have the skills to do it.
All right, lacking is there a motion for a secretary? Lacking a motion, Chief Cox, you remain secretary.
I'm honored.
yeah.
Thank you very much. Moving back to the regular
Regular order.
order, as an order, continuing business number under item 6A, vegetation management, Chief Cox.
Thank you, President Burke. This is for the increased vegetation abatement ordinance, or the additional parcels in the vegetation abatement ordinance for removal of weeds and other vegetation in the El Granada area. You'll notice on there that there is a date in December that they must abate by, or the district will take action in the abatement process and recover the funds during the lien process through the tax roll. Before I ask for any motions, is there any member, open a public hearing? Is there any member of the public who would like to speak on this item, vegetation management? Hearing none, I'll close the public meeting. And first of all, do I have a motion?
So
We
moved.
have this would be approving the letter in the process of going forward with the vegetation management. Is that it, Chief Cox?
That's correct. Yeah, this is the final notice, and then taking any comments from the public.
Now-
And this letter that is in our packet would be sent and used to notify people in those affected properties.
Correct. Yes.
Here's a little bit of a problem here. They talk about the meeting, which will commence at 6 p.m. on December 15th. whether objections will be heard and given due consideration. It's about 5:17, and it'll be a while before we get to 6. I'm comfortable with where we are because I would not anticipate anybody showing up. But if somebody wanted to be litigious, they might use something like that.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, John.
no, Kai, you're probably the best to answer. Go ahead.
I was just going to suggest that since you're on the item now, why don't you take action on it with the understanding that at 6 o'clock, I think we'll probably still be here or around 6 o'clock, we'll hopefully still be here. You can just see if anybody from the public has shown up. And if so, you can just reopen the item and accept the public comment.
With that comment, do I have a motion to approve moving forward with the changes in vegetation management?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Bruce McKimmie. Any further discussion? Roll call, please, Melissa.
Director Cheryl,
Yes.
Director Stockman,
Yes.
Director McKimmie,
Yes.
Vice President Cockrell,
Yes,
President Burke.
Yes. Moving on to item B, awarding the vegetation abatement contractor, Chief Cox.
Yeah, thank you. If you'll remember, you gave me direction to find or release a bid notice for the actual abatement process of those lots. We did not receive any bids for that proposal. And maybe not a surprise with the amount of work that's out there in this field right now. But we are recommending that we, or asking for, staff recommending asking for, entering in a contract with the Bay Tree specialists who are actually or have been working on projects along the coast and have the capacity and the expertise to actually pull off vegetation abatement in any remaining lot that doesn't take action on their own.
I make a motion that we proceed with pursuing a contract with Bay Area Tree Specialists. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Second. Discussion?
Chief Cox, is it known that they're willing and able, well, they're the size to be able to pull it off? Have you had a discussion? Are they willing to take that on?
Yeah, they are. In fact, I had a discussion with one of their owners about their capacity and their willingness to do it. And they were all about it. So I feel as though they have the capacity. They also did some of the project work that's been taking place in El Granado over the last few months. So we know that they have reliability as well.
That's great. Thank you for doing that.
Mhm.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please, Melissa.
Director Cheryl,
Yes.
Director Stockman,
Yes.
Director McKimmie,
Yes.
Vice President Cockrell,
yes,
President Burke.
Yes. Moving on to item C, continuing business, Chief Cox.
All right, thank you. I'm just going to pull up my notes. This was really on the heels of last month's report that was brought to the board for the increased additional staffing within the district. You remember the last report, we discussed a number of items, including the fire suppression addition, the fire marshal's office, as well as the command staff. At the direction of the board this month, we bring forward the potential options for the fire marshal's office, increasing the, excuse me, my light just fell off, increasing the capacity in that office. And in that report, you'll notice probably a couple really important pieces to the kind of Fire Prevention Bureau. And Chief Silva's on the line as well if you have any specific questions for him. One is that just the number of plans that are coming through the office right now has increased significantly. And that's a direct result of just the development that's going on along the coast. Every plan that comes through the office results in at least 3 inspections, follow-up inspections, if not more. If there's any issue that comes along or something that has to be rectified, that's an additional visit. The second important thing to note on there is we have several very large projects going on in the district, including some hotels, some strip malls, the Big Wave project, the housing project up in Montera. And those projects, although not in the plan review phase or the inspection phase, they require fire department input from the beginning as far as access, egress, the setbacks that we'd like to see for vegetation management, and they obviously take time. And then the third is just the fact that we're increasing our vegetation abatement program. We're renewing our efforts on reducing the fuel load in the district and have committed to an action plan. And it's for those reasons that we recommend that at the very minimum, we increase that deputy fire marshal role within the district of adding an additional captain in there. That captain would report with the other district captain to the fire marshal. And we'd still also be using a supplemental vendor for some of the plan reviews and inspections on an as-needed basis moving forward.
Thank you, Chief. Let me make just a couple of comments because I certainly expounded on a number of these things at the last meeting. But first of all, the staff report in the packet was excellent. The detail in it was very appreciated, very accurate. I would say that in terms of financing, we will not, the way the CAL FIRE contract is worded at the top step, we will not exceed the CAL FIRE budget, but certainly will have an impact, whatever we do, on the overall budget of the Coastside Fire Protection District. I certainly agree that additional resources are justified and needed in the fire marshal office and so forth. We've added with last week and what's coming up in probably in January with additional items on our calendar regarding the assistant chief. We'll be adding a number of new positions, obviously with the accompanying costs at that time. At the same time that this is going on, and I'll mention a couple of them, and later on in the meeting, we're having some significant operating costs in the district in other areas that in terms of inflation, CalPERS, and so forth. But that's just in background. My suggestion at this point in time is that we add the deputy fire marshal at this point in time, get that individual on board, take another look at sometime later in the year as to where we stand in terms of need and that type of thing. And also at that later date, consider whether we're going to go to a full-time fire marshal on the coast. I'd also add that I think some of you remember that we've had to locate and have in place a full-time fire marshal. Was a very lengthy, tedious position. I don't know all background and why that is. We went for well over a year without a full fire marshal some years ago because he wouldn't. Let me stop ranting. My recommendation, and I won't. In fact, I'll make it a thought that I'll recommend and make a motion to hire a full-time deputy fire marshal and consider a full-time fire marshal at a later date. That's my motion. Do I have a second? Then we'll see we have discussion.
I'll second that.
We have a second. I'm not sure who did that, but was that JB?
Yes.
Okay. Discussion. Yeah, discussion, please.
One of the things I'd like to point out, and we're very concerned about the money and what this is going to cost. May I point out that as a result of all these plans and all this construction that's going out, the revenue to the district will in fact go up. So in essence, this position will pay for itself in the additional plans that get approved.
I don't know if that's true. I would have to ask staff what percentage of fees, what that number is in relation to the cost of the position. Because I think that's an assumption. That I do agree that the fees offset that position, and I'm in support of the position. I'll tell you that from the beginning. But I'm curious of how that fees, because those fees are pretty constant. They're already somewhat in the budget, except what the increased growth is in relation to that. So that might be a number we can come back later. That would be curious to know for us, is how much that affects these positions, because other positions don't have that return on them. these positions actually do. And I think that's important to know that number. And so while I have the floor, I would also ask for Chief Silva's input on this, and specifically what his observations are of how he's managing the staff in regards to keeping up. And then also what his staff is requesting of him within that office. Is that a normal conversation of like, hey, we're having a hard time keeping up? You know, can you address, can we, is there a way to add positions? Does that conversation happen, Chief Silva?
Yes, for some reason my audio is not, my camera's not turned on, but yes, that conversation happens a lot. So what we're dealing with, if you guys can hear me,
Yes.
is so we're using a lot of county fire positions over here to help keep up with the workload. So I mean, technically I have Austin and CJ Dyer working over here. 95% of their load is helping John Riddell and Pat keep up with the workload in this office, and then, you know, trying to juggle the county side as well. So, I mean, we're using 2 extra positions, and then plus me being funded between the 2 positions, trying to keep up with everything. So the workload is just compounded over time, and it's just overwhelming for the guys to try to juggle all of it and keep up with the, you know, going out for the inspection. So when you have 140 plus plan reviews, inspections, multiple inspections on those projects also, you know, follow. So then now you have the time out in the field doing that, which now you can't do the plan reviews, and it's just this revolving door where you continuously get behind. And then, you know, multiple meetings with the building department and, you know, plan reviewers, and then construction workers, and all these people want to take a lot of your time. So by the end of the project, you've spent multiple hours on one project, even though you're only getting paid for 2, you know, site visits or whatever. So I think adding the extra position in here definitely would help with the workload. I mean, we use the engines to help us with a lot of the business inspections, and you know, the engines workloads are starting to be a lot extra as well, because they have the calls, the training, they have to do the LE 100 inspections, hydrants, smoke detectors, they're doing business inspections, and they have the station duties, equipment maintenance, and other upkeep. So then we throw that on them as well. So we're trying to, between me and CJ, who's county funded right now, are doing extra business inspections. John Riddell's trying to help us with business inspections on top of his workload of the plans, because he's our main plan guru, him and Pat, and the other guys, everybody else is still trying to learn the plan side of it. It's a whole different, you know, side of this job. So yeah, it's definitely extra people would help eliminate some of that workload, and probably definitely help us keep up with the business inspection, especially the mandatories, which we are, you know, 100% compliant on the mandatories. And then the annual inspections, a lot of those don't have to be done annually, but in the board contract that we have with you guys, we have it set up as annually. So some of those could be done biannually, which would help eliminate some of that workload on the engines. Instead of doing, you know, approximately 870 of them every year, we can actually split that in half and do a lot of those type of occupancies every other year. And that would help eliminate some of the workload as well.
Well, thank you, Chief Silva. That's a great explanation and support of the position. So with that, did I hear that if the board was changed the contract to say that those inspections could be done biannually, that it would make the workload in the office easier?
I think it would help eliminate more for the engine side of it, because we still need the engines to do,
right,
you know, the business inspections they do, because it helps get them out in the field, it gets them into the public, and they see these businesses for if they catch on fire. Then they've seen it during the day, they've seen some of the target hazards in there and some of the issues for them to deal with. So right now we're asking 3 engines to do approximately 870 business inspections on top of all their other duties. And it's just nearly impossible for them to keep up and do it efficiently. So I think if we split that in half and did them biannually, the engines can actually do their part. And we go out with them on any that are more complex than just a normal, you know, mom and pop type shop. We'll go out with them and meet with them, and we kind of all go through it together. So I think it would definitely help eliminate some of the work, but it's just helping them have more time to do what's their priority, which is training, calls, and the other stuff, and not compounding them with so much stuff, and maybe them not being as efficient as they could be if we give them a little bit less.
I would say for the rest of the board, for being a engine captain for almost 20 years and having that responsibility and knowing the importance, knowing the process of doing the inspections and the amount of load that is on first responders, I would agree that could be split up or the load lessened and would not affect, in my opinion, the safety of the community. And so that's my input. But of course, I would expect Chief Cox and Chief Armstrong to voice their opinion on whether or not that was what's best for their organization.
Yeah, unfortunately, I hadn't, this just popped in my head while we were talking. So
Yeah,
I hadn't
I
had a
asked you
chance
the
to,
question. Yeah.
and I hadn't had a chance to discuss that with Chief Cox or
Right.
Chief Armstrong. So, I mean, they might say absolutely not. They want the 870 done. That was just my opinion based off of the question you did, and it popped in my head. And I go,
Yeah.
I know it's possible, but we do have an agreement with the Coastside Board that
Yeah.
we would do all 870 in 1 year, even though they're not required. So if that
Well,
was
right. And that was the motivation of my question, is what could we do as a board to help affect the workload of the crews and with meeting the requirement of the contract in the community. So thank you, Chief Silva.
Just to clear, just to clear one issue up. When I spoke about the additional staffing paying for itself, I was not speaking about the fees, but I was speaking about if we can get these projects finished on a timely basis, then they join the tax roll. And once they're on the tax roll, that's when it raises the revenue for the district.
Great point, JB. Thank you.
Cynthia?
This very useful discussion about plan checks is vital, of course. But there's also additional pressure on the WUI activities, the Woodland Urban Interface activities, largely as a result of the studies that are now going on concerning excessive fuels in parcels in residential neighborhoods or abutting residential neighborhoods. And so a lot of people are going to be coming, to speak clearly, a lot of people are talking about coming to the fire marshal's office to ask for their lots to be inspected. That seems to be the tenor of the community. So I'm concerned about the WUI officers' time commitment and span of control and just what it's possible for a human being to do, in this time where there is so much attention on the vegetation condition of the lots.
Bruce?
And it was this year, last year, we reset our fee schedule. So we raised the prices to make it according to the county.
Yeah, that's correct. So it's about 18 months ago now that we renewed our fees. The fees partially offset what we get for going towards the employee. There's a lot of hours and projects that are not billable. Maybe it's a project that's in development. There's no plans that have come through. And the WUI is a lot less cost recoverable because essentially a lot of those services are not covered by our fee schedule. So it does offset it, but it definitely does not offset to the degree of a full salary.
Let me make a suggestion. First of all, let me say I clearly am not as knowledgeable as some other people are on the board in terms of the duties and responsibilities and all the other intimate details of the fire marshal's office, but except to know they're doing a good job. But what I would suggest is this evening, go forward and a vote on adding the deputy fire marshal. Ask the staff to do some additional research on giving us, for example, should we at some point in the future need it? Do we need another deputy, an additional deputy fire marshal, or do we need a full-time fire marshal? Or do we need somebody from, Four Clovers, or whatever the name of that place is, and answer the question of how much of the cost of a deputy fire marshal is recoverable through fees. That would be a subject for a future meeting, and we would base some possible action on that kind of a staff report. That is my suggestion. I had no objections. So we have on the floor at this moment, and I would provide that by comments, Chief Cox, if you would, to take that as some direction for a future meeting, depending on your schedule and so forth. But with that, we have a motion and we have a second to hire a deputy fire marshal. Did anybody wish to speak? If not, then all right, please.
I
roll call,
do,
please, Melissa.
I do have a question. I'm just not sure where in this is the correct order to ask it. So I'll
Go
just
ahead,
venture out there and be
Go ahead.
wrong.
go ahead.
When this originally came up last month, there were 4 positions being discussed. One was approved. Now we're talking about the second one, and there were 2 others. Are those going to be cycled up into agendas into January?
Yes.
Okay.
Well,
great.
one of them will be in January at least, maybe 2. Yes.
Okay, thank you. That was my question.
Okay. Roll call, please, Melissa.
Yes. Director Cheryl,
Yes.
Director Stockman,
Yes.
Director McKimmy,
Yes.
Vice President Cockrell,
Yes,
President Burke.
Yes. Moving on to
Melissa?
item H, review and discuss and adopt a resolution finding the meeting of the board of directors via teleconferencing project against the ongoing imminent health and safety risk proposed by COVID-19. Is that Chief Cox or Kai that would like to cover that?
That's all, Kai.
Okay.
I'll take it. So thank you. Good evening. At the last meeting, and at every meeting going forward until this ends, we will have this resolution on the agenda. And at the last meeting, the board asked that rather than just bring back the same resolution with the same staff report, to give a little bit more, to give the board options about what it could do. Rather than just keep having all remote meetings. And so what we've laid out is what we think are the 3 options. And that's to continue what we've been doing with remote meetings as we're having here tonight, to move to a more hybrid format, which would have an in-person component and a Zoom component. And the third option being go back to full in-person meetings as we used to hold prior to the pandemic. The recommendation is we'll call it a soft recommendation to keep with the status quo and keep with the full remote meetings. But that being said, I believe we can pull off any of the 3 options that the board thinks is best. And I'm happy to take any questions.
I would,
Yeah, go ahead. Before we make any kind of a motion, let's just discuss it for a minute. Go ahead, JB.
I was just gonna speak in favor of keeping it as is.
Yeah.
So we get more of a handle on what's going on with some of these latest variants that seem to be coming out.
Yeah.
So when we get a little bit better idea where we are and how contagious the fact is, I think the safest thing to do is keep doing what we've been doing.
Yeah, every time I pick up the newspaper, something different is changed by somebody. So it's, I agree, GB, to try to do something different at this point is maybe futile, but any other comments? Nobody, okay. Then I make a resolution to approve resolution number 2021-56,
Second,
which is basically keeping as it is. That's it. Okay. All right. Any further comments? Roll call, please, Melissa.
Director Cheryl,
Yes.
Director Stockman,
Yes.
Director McKimmy,
Yes.
Vice President Cockrell,
yes,
and President Burke.
Yes. Thank you.
Cheryl?
Moving on to,
Hang on,
excuse me?
Gary. Cheryl, after we vote, could you say, motion passed, 5-0 by roll call?
Oh, sure. Yes, I will do that.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Mhm.
Okay. All right, moving on and to item I, review and discuss, adopt a resolution approving a settlement agreement with JL Fall Construction. Kai,
Sure. This is pretty straightforward. The board should have known that this was coming. This is to essentially close out the Station 41 project and to settle all of the claims that the contractor DL Falk submitted at the end of the project. This was the product of a bit of negotiation that Chief Cox really took the lead on, and I think did a great job in getting to a resolution here. So essentially, this is an authorization to sign on to the agreement, the settlement agreement, and to move some funds from the Station 44 budget over to the Station 41 budget item so that we have sufficient funds to pay the settlement amount and to actually authorize paying the settlement amount. The one issue that's addressed in the staff report, which will hold up this from being a fully tied together with a bow on it thing, is that there are some outstanding permits that need to get finalized, and the payment actually won't occur until those permits are final. So we will have absolute resolution on the project before those funds get transferred. And I will
Thank you,
take
Kai.
any questions you have.
Do I have a motion to adopt resolution number 2021-57?
I'll move that, yes.
That's a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion moved and seconded. Discussion. I just make one other observation, just so we don't confuse it. When we move money around from those two funds that Kai mentioned, those funds are funny. Those monies and funds are fungible. We can move them wherever we want. That's part of our business. With that, any further questions? Roll call, please, Melissa.
Director Cheryl,
Yes.
Director Stockman,
Yes.
Director McKimmy,
It pains me to no end, but yes.
Vice President Cockrell,
A very painful yes.
and President Burke.
Yes.
The motion passes 5-0.
I just want to thank Chief Cox and Kai for all the work they did on this. It was a long and laborious process.
Well done. Yeah. Yeah. Moving on, item J, review and discuss adopt resolution approving the settlement agreement and release with prospective plaintiffs. Kai.
So Jonathan gives me all the staff reports where the painful votes get cast. So that's me again, yes. On this one, as you know, we're moving to district elections. What prompted that move was the demand letter that came in about a year ago. This is to settle out the potential litigation that could have flowed from that. The nice part about this is that statutorily, the prospective plaintiffs could be entitled to actually over $30,000 with the CPI that gets built into that number. But essentially, they could have gotten about $30,000, and we were able to work with their counsels to keep it at $7,000. So it's a hard pill to swallow, but it's a smaller pill than maybe we otherwise might have gotten. So there is some silver lining there. And again, I'll take any questions you have about it.
I have a question. Did they initially bill us for the whole 30,000?
They did not. They did not. So the way that worked was initially they gave us an estimate about what they thought was going to be their claimed cost, and they initially told me they thought it was going to be in the $20,000 range. When we dug down deep into the actual costs, we came up with the itemization that is attached with the agreement in the staff report.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions or comments? And I asked for, do I have a resolution, a motion to adopt resolution number 2021-58? I make a motion to approve that resolution. Do I have a second?
Seconded.
Cheryl, Cynthia made the second. Any further discussions? Roll call, please, Melissa.
Director Cheryl,
Yes.
Director Stockman,
Yes.
Director McKimmy,
More pain? Yes.
Vice President Cockrell,
Yes,
and President Burke.
Yes.
And the motion passes 5-0.
I notice it's a lot easier to approve things where you have no choice. Have you noticed that? All right. Again, moving on to the Board of Directors and Chief reports. The PAS report is in our packet. I forget the exact percentage, but we had a very fine month, as you probably saw from the investment, an increase of $116,000 for the month of October. I think you'll find November will be not quite as positive, but so far that PAS report is going well. Secondly, I'd like to just take just a brief moment and talk just a little bit about the packet that is a public document that's in our packet today, the CalPERS review for the year June 30th, 2020. And the reason I'm going to do this is because, just take a moment to go over a couple of items, is that I anticipate that sometime in the first quarter of next year, we're going to be looking at ways that we might perhaps do some things different with the payments on CalPERS. And I think it's just important that the board really has an understanding of what's in the packet and what's not in the packet. And I'd like to just go through a couple of quick items and urge hopefully the board members to kind of go through this and make any suggestions you might have as to what we might do. But let me just mention a couple of quick items on this thing. That first of all, and importantly enough, this has nothing to do with CAL FIRE. This has to do to all our involvement with CalPERS have to do with employees from the prior union prior to 2007. And the other point I'd make that, we have obligations to fulfill on this, the retirement contracts, and certainly we're going to do this. This is no way an attempt to get around not doing anything like that. The next point I'd make is that we have no control over CalPERS, zero. So we have some things that we might do financially, and I'm just going to touch on them and ask for your consideration, thinking about them when we take this up after the first year. Our funding status, if you look at the report, by the way, it really is two reports. One part of it is what they call miscellaneous, which is the administrative people who used to work for the Coastside Fire Protection District. And the second part of the thing, and the more meaty part of it, if you will, is for the safety employees. But it's divided into two places, which is somewhat confusing. From the funding status on the miscellaneous, we're 60% fully funded, 60%. And on the safety was 69% fully funded. But we have an underfunded position within the district of some $12 million at this point in time. We have a lot of reserves, as you are well aware from our previous discussions, but we have a priority with Station 44 that I think we agree is we're on hold as to we find out what the heck we can do with that or what we can't do with that type of things. Our CalPERS costs have escalated wildly over the past and continue to escalate. I just took a quick look at a couple of years in the past, but if you go back to just 5 years ago, our costs were roughly $700,000. In this coming year, our costs are going to be 1.5 million. They've doubled in 5 years. And the projection is going to give continued increases in the past. I think it's fair to say that anybody who's looked at the management and the results from CalPERS has seen them to be less than ideal, to be very kind. In most businesses with their record over the past couple of decades, they'd be out of business, but that's beyond our control, nothing to do with it. I would just suggest that, touch upon that we will be dealing with in the next, hopefully the first quarter, a couple of items as what possible actions we might have. One is do absolutely nothing. We have the actual funds, we're going to pay for it. We'll be paying an increasing amount of our budget, but that's certainly the option to do it. we could establish a Section 115 trust, which we had on our agenda for an education item a couple of months ago. And that's very similar to the PAS trust that we have for the employees for healthcare. We'd have a similar trust set up for retirement so that we would help pay the increased cost of CalPERS each month. So that's another thing. We could do nothing. We could set up a 115 trust. The miscellaneous part of our CalPERS agreement is relatively minor. I won't go into it. It's in the report. We could consider buying that out, paying it off if we had money. That would be one of an option that we could consider as well. And then, and one of the things I would think would be important to do is to hire somebody to kind of go through these various, consultant, to kind of go through these various items again and try to give us some real ammunition and data as to what the alternatives were. At one time, the board came within a very short breath of buying out and bonding to pay off CalPERS, excuse me, and did not do that. But I think hiring a consultant to kind of go over all of it and just give us some more specific alternatives might be very helpful. We have obviously a fiduciary responsibility to do whatever we can to save the taxpayers' money, and that seems to be one of the things we could do. Chief, did you everybody get a chance to talk with that consultant that we might possibly be interested? Did you ever talk with him?
I did. I had a couple conversations with him, and he does have some really good ideas and a very firm grasp about the intricacies of what this is. So I, after speaking with him, highly recommend that the board, and I think we'll bring it up next month, consider getting that professional assessment from him, especially before any decisions about a new fire station based on what he was saying.
Perfect. Thank you, and I look forward to seeing that on the agenda next month. That's the end of my comments on the finances. JB, did you have any comments on the finances?
No, you covered everything I could possibly want to cover.
Okay. The monthly sheet is in our packet, and everything is in order. We're fine financially all the way across the board. No problems. Volunteer committee report, Director Stockwell. Excuse me,
Stockwell,
Harkwell. Too many. Okay.
Actually, I've attended two volunteer meetings since our last board meeting here. And I just basically spent a lot of time going through some of the changes we've done. For example, Melissa Codnell acting as our new clerk, and proclamation for Chief Larkerman, and some documents for the District of Distinction. And the launch of Delta 30, CFPD, discussed and continued Zoom versus in person. So I covered all this and tried to give them as much information as I could. The training issue, which I've always been very interested in, because in the way it works is we have these, they have a volunteer group, which is both a 501c3, and then you have the Coastside volunteers, which are operational. So we discussed some of the training issues they're going through, and the fact that they've been working to help at the county event center. And they had been going to help at the vaccination clinic is I was not aware, but apparently they have been doing that. And then they talked about there was a vegetation fire by Smith Field, and apparently the volunteers responded to that, and there was no training on the 25th of December. So for the December meeting, which was held on the 9th, it was usually scheduled for the 2nd, but due to some training issues they had, it got put off until tonight. And like so much of these things, they go through a lot of the same stuff we go through. And then one of the things I would point out that at that meeting, there were 12 volunteers. And one of the things that I'm seeing now is more and more volunteers are being brought in to the district. which apparently they are stepping up and doing a lot of adjunct manning where it's very important to us. They discussed some of their usual social events, the Christmas party. They had an auto extraction class done on the 2nd, which was the reason that they delayed the meeting until the 9th. They pointed out that the offices of the district have been reopened so long as the people are masked. So I'm guessing that that's continuing that way. Is that correct, Chief Cox?
That's right. Yeah, for members of the public who want to come in, they need to have a mask on.
And then I discussed the new vegetation management program, and the way I just described it was it's a more robust vegetation management plan, and that we're not going to be just cutting grass anymore. As a point of news, one of our Coastside volunteers got hired at Menlo Park. So we view that as a good, so some people really like the program we're running out here. There was a general alarm at the church, and we had one volunteer leave his uncle's funeral to respond. The last academy will come off probation in June. And they pointed out that anybody wants one of the old shirts that they're not using anymore, they're there for the taking. And then finally, their financial situation is they've got $34,112 in their checking account, $173,000, $113 in the savings, for a total of $207,225. And so that covers both meetings, and I can answer any questions that I can. On a personal note, the previous volunteer meeting, I showed up and watched the meeting, and so the first thing Chief Lord says to me as I come in the door, he says, "Hey, you want a booster?" And my answer was, "Is Helen ready?" So I kind of stumbled into a booster, which it was nice to be able to do without having to go through all the rigmarole I went through to get the first 2 shots.
Okay. All right, thank you, Jamie. Land and Structures Report, Director Cockrell, Director McKimmey.
I think we're kind of on hold.
Yeah, okay, I agree. Vegetation Management Committee Report, Director Stockman, Director Sherrill.
Yeah, I'll start and I'll let Cynthia jump in, but I think the first thing I want to do is update the board on this El Granado wildfire resiliency program that's going on in El Granado. I'm going to summarize it pretty short. I don't want to go in great detail of it because we'll keep updating you each month as we go through the process, and any questions, feel free. But I just went over what Resource Conservation District had sent us as far as the proposal they put out to bid and then the winning bid. But the quick facts are it's sponsored by San Mateo County Resource Conservation District. It's through Supervisor Horsley's office. It's being funded with $75,000 that come from Measure K. It was, if you haven't been following the details, it was really born from the MCC, Mid-Coast Council meetings, and their concern about El Granado. The scope of work that it's going to involve is defining the wildfire risk, providing an assessment of those risks, identifying scope potential actions to reduce the risk and build resiliency. They're going to conduct 3 separate RCD-led meetings with all the partners. The partners in the group are CAL FIRE, and then also County Fire, the district, county parks, and MCC, as well as the aid from Chief Horsley's office. So those are the participants. The process in a simple summarization is they're trying to gather the science, data, use that to make an assessment of what I stated earlier, of what the risks are and what possible actions could be. The contract was awarded to Panorama Environmental with some subcontractors and consultants, which is Vibrant Planet and Prometheus Consulting. Their experience, is they seem like as a local company, they're the most positioned one to do this type of report. They've worked on some hazard reduction for Mid-Penn, some vegetation management for UCSF at Mount Sutro, Stanford University Wildlife Management Plan, San Lorenzo Valley Water District, Alpine County Wildfire Mitigation Plan. So, this is kind of what they do with the mix of personnel that they have. For us, our involvement so far has been 3 meetings. The first being we invited the Resource Conservation District, specifically Kel-X is a representative of that, to our Vegetation Management Committee to say, okay, what is this about? What is the intention of this? Where was it born? What things do we need to know from a starting point? I think both Cynthia and I felt, and Chief Cox felt, that was productive, at least in their explanation, an initial explanation. There was initial follow-up, again, with RCD that involved myself and Cynthia and Chief Sampson, Chief Cosgrave. And then there was a kickoff meeting with the participating partners. It was more of an introduction. Again, kind of gave us a sense of who each party is and what their involvement will be in the process. And I'll pause there. Is there any questions just from the beginning of the explanation of what it is that
No?
No? Okay, good. Well, we'll keep you updated as we go farther on. There's one issue before I pass it to Cynthia that I want to bring up is that you saw from council in regards to our question about acting with civility as we move in. So a little bit different when we go outside of our normal board meeting and engage with the community. And because this has been such a contentious issue, especially in El Granada, and what staff has our staff has been very professional, in how they've dealt with the community. And both Cynthia and I had a concern of like, how much can you tolerate as staff, right? And being, again, from the fire service, that's just a reality of being a public servant, in my opinion, is, you have to have the skills. You're going to deal with difficult people. But there's also an issue of like, do we want to make a policy that more guides us and helps define our culture within the board, like our existing policy is for conduct within board meetings, that would also apply to outside of that? And with that point, I'm going to pass it to Cynthia for any addition to that, and then ask for Kai's response to that, and then just any open discussion of the rest of the board. And I think it's important. I know it's taking extra time, but I think it's important, especially for Cynthia and I's involvement as we move forward, to have a deeper interaction with the community.
Thank you very much, Director Stockman. Just to go back before I address that public civility issue, with a couple of more aspects of the RCD study, which you did summarize so well. We really appreciate that at the beginning, they were not, the study was not structured in an inclusive way to fire services. And since there are consultants on this RCD project whose job it is to come back with fire recommendations for this community, we felt it was especially important that fire services and the science that we bring to the table was well represented. And we appreciate that Chief Cox, Chief Sampson for forestry, Captain Seeley for the WUI issues with the Fire Marshal's office, and Chief Cosgrave for operational issues in and around the El Granada area are actively involved in this analysis to provide expertise to the RCD study. The study involves a listening program, and that's going to happen in January. And all members of the public are invited to come and address the consulting team and those of us, and they did also include the Coastside Fire Protection District Board. In meeting, they've asked Director Stockman and I to participate on the leadership of this study. So we'll be there in January, as will our 4 senior members of our staff. And what we anticipate based on what the MCC has experienced and other side meetings is that there may be some degree of truculence amongst our beloved citizens. So we're going to approach this, as of course everyone says, with utmost professionalism. But we have seen in time that in this Half Moon Bay world, we do better when we come to our public officials politely, with dignity. We ask the pitchforks to be left at the door. We ask the public servants to be treated with respect, which they have not been in the course of this project so far, especially involving Corey Park, where one of our senior members was flat out, he presented science and the science was not accepted as being truth. So that is the purpose of this policy. When I was at that conference in Tahoe, one of the things that the gentleman who was responsible for policy development for boards said, if you have something in your culture, in your organization, that's important. And he was talking about in terms of other districts that were consolidating. He said, memorialize it with a policy, state it clearly, put your expectation out there. Even if it's not absolutely legally, maybe your actions, there's not that much you can do. You can still say what you expect as an organizational culture. And the purpose of this policy is simply to say, we expect our representatives to be treated with respect. It's as simple as that. We would like we respect First Amendment, we enjoy rigorous public discourse on thorny issues, but it's all how you phrase it. It's all how you treat the people so those firefighters that work, those officers that work so hard for us aren't driving home after these meetings going, why am I doing this job? These people don't appreciate what we're putting into this. The whole point of this is civility in public discourse towards CFPD staff and directors. That's the only thing, and I can't say how much I appreciate what Jean has brought to the table in terms of just spot on legal expertise in explaining what our limitations of response are. We can't close the meeting unless there's disruption, and disruption has a lot of definitions. We can't recuse ourselves if we find ourselves in the midst of public discourtesy. But I hate to think that our distinguished fire personnel are going to be subject to
Truculence.
pardon me, truculence. Love that word.
So you had people at your meeting.
Without any opportunity. Pardon me?
So you had people at your meeting that were aggressively self-assertive and belligerent, or scathingly harsh, vitriolic, truculent, and criticism, or they were feeling or displaying ferocity or cruel and savage. Is that correct?
Versions of that, yes, sir. That's a good, pretty comprehensive definition of truculent there. So with that the whole point of this policy is to state, think about it. I mean, there'll be better words, but before they are treated rudely at meetings, they are the people who are going to show up if you have a heart attack or if your house is burning down or whatever needs to be done. So think about that before you treat them in a way that will make them regret their professional career decisions. I just feel, I know this is the way of American public life these days. It's not that I'm too sensitive in terms of my own sensibilities for these things. I think we should be able to stand up for our professionals in a way that says, here are our expectations of how they may be treated in public.
Thank you, Cynthia. Steve or Cynthia, anything else on this subject? I have a question. Who's the chair of this organization?
Of the RCD or the committee, MCC, or the study?
I guess maybe I guess both. I mean, who was in charge of running it? The meetings that apparently you're discussing had some very disruptive things happen, whatever they were. Who was the chair of that meeting?
Let me clarify that of the meetings that both Cynthia and I and staff has participated so far in regards to this project has not had that outside of what we've seen within MCC and their input. So they direct ours, and what we were talking about, the example we used was when staff was interacting with the El Granada community on earlier issues before this started. So I want to clarify that. And then Cynthia, I'll put it back to you on the description of who's leading this.
Okay, specifically the disruptive incident and the direct discourtesy to our senior staff was in April at a hearing on about Corey Park. But it is the same community of people who are involved with this. The head of this study is Kellex Nelson, who is the executive director of the RCD, the regional, help me with that.
Resource
Conservation District. There it is.
Yeah.
And that's a special district that is from Horsley's, that was authorized by Horsley's office. The other person who's experienced this to a significant degree is the MCC organization within its own members. They are not the head of this study. They have the same stature in this, if you will, as the fire services, to the extent that we are all members who are not part of the consulting team, but who are there as part of the guidance of this project, this RCD-led project.
Well, first of all, I'll have one request. If there's any items that are in writing in terms of what's going on within the whole project, I would love to see it. And I hope you would make them available to the board members. I think that would be very helpful. In terms of how people handle themselves at meetings, and I won't go through all the stuff that you saw in Gene's memo and so forth, it is clearly a very complicated issue, so you don't tromp on somebody to get the desired results you want. I'm certainly open to considering everything. My personal experience is that whoever is the chair or running the meeting is the one that has the responsibility to keep it on track and keep it civil. And we're not in this organization, but in others where people have tried to have a point-by-point policy on procedures and who can say and degree, trying to implement that is frankly frustrating. And it just somebody wants to talk, they're just going to talk and interrupt. But I'll tell you what I do think is helpful is, rather than trying to provide a document that provides what the audience should do, is to provide a document that would provide the powers of the chairperson, and saying that, look, if we have this chairperson can cut off anybody, if appropriate, call a recess, do whatever it is, but to give the chairperson more power and expect the chairperson to act, I think is probably much more beneficial, but that's an opinion. Anyway, I don't know that we're going to go anywhere else with it this evening with just a report. Thank you very much. That's great. And I look forward to hearing more on it. It's a very important subject. I've lost track of where I am. Special District Association, no report. ALS JPA, no report. FDAC liaison, no report. Emergency Preparedness, Director Stockman.
I will pass it to Cynthia, please. There was not a meeting last month. So
Okay.
Cynthia, is there anything you want to add to as far as CERT or what's happening within the community?
Yes, do CERT as well, Cynthia, please.
Okay, on the emergency management side, there are all the organizations like KEEP and the HMB Amateur Radio Club and the other meetings that we have with the county. Those are all winding down because of the holidays. The biggest recent exercise was really Monday and Tuesday, Monday of this week, where the greatest concern was for the homeless who refused to take refuge in Pacifica. And they were under the bridge and the water was rising. And so members of the community, including council persons, were involved with helping them to change their mind about staying under that bridge. So they were successful in that and the people survived the storm. So that's the local emergency management report, as far as I know. CERT, CERT is just coming along. We graduated 29 new CERTs on the,
Good.
we now have more than 318 CERTs on the Coastside. That graduation was November 6th. We have also put out our 2022 calendar. It's on the website. It's coastsidecert@gmail.com. And right there up front is the full calendar that, as we know it today, for the coming year. It includes a spring and a fall basic training class. That'll be 60 more certs. And the interesting thing is that we're shifting back from having to go to hybrid for COVID. We're coming back to offering a parallel track. You can choose to take it in person with Chief Cosgrave and his cohort of trainers, or you can choose to take it online. And the 10 modules you have to cover, what they call classroom, is going to dovetail into a single training, in-person training skills day and graduation. And that again will happen in March and in November, and that schedule is all laid out because some people enjoyed the online aspect of the personal convenience of going at their own pace, and other people just couldn't deal with the computer side of it and want to be taught in person. So as we're coming back from COVID, of course, masking at all times, we have had 3 large training days. These days involve upwards of 70 people starting in September of last year, and we have never had a COVID infection. We are pretty serious and rigorous about how our COVID prevention protocols are respected during this day-long training session. So, so we are in this transition period now between in-person and online. The schedule also includes 5 advanced CERT training classes on various topics, mostly medical, traffic management, and then people's choice. They get to choose what they'd like to learn, and we'll find the subject matter experts to teach them. And we have 70 more folks to graduate through the Spanish Listos program, which is emergency first aid and family safety in Spanish. And we provide them through a grant from the city, personal emergency supplies. So that's upon their graduation. So that's CERT's initial program for the coming year. It is, okay, now I'm gonna brag, it's the most, it's pretty much the most aggressive training program on the peninsula. And we also welcome people who come from other areas and would like to be trained. So we are very active involved in a good neighbor policy. So if Chief Cosgrave, pardon me?
Is that it, Cynthia?
Yeah, pretty much. I just wanted to thank Chief Cosgrave for all of his training time, because as you read down that schedule, he's really giving his personal hours, his evenings and his weekends to do most of this training. That's it.
Thank you. Cynthia, congratulations to you and all members of CERTS for just an outstanding job. Just terrific.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank
Great.
you so much. I'll pass that
Yeah.
on to the team. Thank you.
Moving on then, the Fire Chief's report. Chief Cox.
All right, thank you. Just a few things to start off with COVID. We have no current cases within the district personnel right now, so no operational impacts at this point. We will, as an agency, as a state agency, be starting to test our employees weekly in the near future. And that program is being developed as a mandate of the state employment system out of Sacramento. As far as management goes, we have another meeting with Supervisor Horsley and Canapa's fuel reduction task force. That is this coming Friday. And in the district, we're working to implement the first due software that we purchased, which is the information about building data that engine companies, when they arrive, can actually pull up on their tablet. We had a meeting about 2 weeks ago with AMR. AMR is the EMS transport provider for San Mateo County's exclusive operating area. Like most public service and private agencies in EMS right now, they are experiencing a shortage of paramedics. It's starting to have some impacts operationally that they were hoping to work out operational agreements with fire on. A productive conversation. No definitives came out of it, but just a good awareness that due to the COVID pandemic, essentially paramedic programs were put on hold for 2 years. And we're seeing the repercussions of that now, and the fact that there's not a viable workforce coming through the pipeline for different positions. So they're not alone. Most fire agencies are also in the same boat, very understaffed on the paramedic side. But definitely want to put it on everybody's radar, because I don't think we've seen or will hear the end of this in the near future. As far as operations, a couple significant incidents. We had a car over the side up in south of Devil's Slide, where the person actually survived the accident. Additionally, we've had 2 major storms come through. Both of those have required additional resources. The volunteers have been a huge asset for those events. As far as training, low angle rope rescue and Auto X were completed in the last 6 weeks. This week, Command 2D, which is the fire prevention command class, is being taught at Station 40. On the prevention side, as Chief Silva said, just the increased workload. And working on the citation process with the DA's office right now about how we actually take issues forward should they get to the citation level. As far as facilities are concerned, Station 40, we've had to have one of the windows replaced in the conference room. It was not keeping a seal anymore, and we were getting moisture in it. We've also replaced the fire alarm panel and the smoke detectors at Station 40. That system's now on bay alarm, the same as Station 41. Apparatus, our equipment committee will be going out to Wisconsin in February for the pre-build meeting for the 2 new Pierce engines. As we keep saying on all of these calls, the supply chain issue is alive and well in anything to do with apparatus or vehicles at the moment. And we should have our new battalion chief vehicles here in service in the next few months. I know we've had them for a while, but just getting the parts has been a challenge. Additionally, on the vehicles, we had 2 vehicle accidents this month of district vehicles. One was a response call where engine 40's bumper scraped a post going into an incident. And the other one was one of our battalion chiefs was rear-ended while going to a training class luckily his old vehicle, not his new battalion chief's vehicle, but we will have to get that in for repair once his new vehicle is in service. It's still operable, no injuries, luckily, but just an unfortunate rear ending. As far as the volunteers go, just one additional thing to add. This was the first year with the new handbook that included that stipend for when they respond on a certain number of calls and attend trainings. They get a stipend up to $600 a year to compensate for their fuel, essentially. Those checks were issued this month. I think the collective amount for all the volunteers was less than $1,400 in reimbursement for those kind of incidental costs associated with their responses. And as far as grants are concerned, we're still working on procuring the radios. We've put an order in, but as you can imagine, trying to get radios at the moment is not an easy feat. So we're waiting. Luckily, our window for receiving them is another 6 months, so we should meet the deadline. Just a couple things to put on your radar. One is we got today the final boundaries from the consultant that we hired to audit our actual district boundaries. Not major changes, but a few changes where the county's special tax area and the special tax area for the district is broken up by parcels. And it's essentially, they were auditing what parcels are actually in the district. Very good news, very minor changes. Basically adding a half a parcel and removing a parcel, which is good for us. But you'll see that final map. It has been approved and printed. So you'll see it in the lobby here in the near future about what the actual boundaries of the district are. That boundary serves as the outer perimeter for the redistricting project for figuring out what those new district boundaries are. In speaking with redistricting partners and CHI, we will be bringing a plan before the board for the 5 meetings that we need to have, public meetings between now and April 13th. What we believe is going to have to happen is we're going to have one additional special meeting in January, and we will have to move up the April meeting from the 4th Wednesday of the month to, I believe, the 2nd Wednesday of the month. Those are the only 2 changes in meeting schedule arrangements. The first 2 will give us much more clarity about the process that they'll go through during those 5 meetings with the board. And that's all I have. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chief. Chief Armstrong, did you have comments?
I have the hardest time unmuting. No, nothing particular for the board this evening, but thank you for the opportunity. It's been about the fastest 6 weeks of my career, I think, and just actively running around trying to meet the folks that need to and try to get up to speed on some things. So hoping to get more and more involved with all the boards, and this one in particular is a kind of get my feet under me a little bit better. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief. Great to have you here. Chief, those meeting dates that you outlined, could you get those out to us as soon as possible? Or
I actually have the tentative dates here, and I actually wanted to ask the board if the special meeting was going to be acceptable. So we would like to have a special meeting just for the purpose of having the districting presentation on January 12th. Will that be a problem for anybody on the board?
It is not for me, but
Okay, great. And then the only other change to the normal schedule would be to move up the April meeting to April 13th. So that won't be an additional meeting. That'll just be the normal meeting is moved up 2 weeks.
so January 12th and April 13th?
That's right. Yeah. And then the other 3 meetings will just be the 3 normal meetings that would happen between those 2 meetings.
Okay. As far as I know, that's fine with me. I'm not sure the other board members, but we'll have to see how that works out. Anything else for any board members or comments? If not,
let me just say for the record that we are now at 6:30. I've seen no other members of the public come in, so I believe we're fine on item 6A.
Thank you very much, Guy. And on behalf of the Board of Directors of the Coastside Fire Protection District, I'd like to wish all the staff, all the members of CAL FIRE, Melissa, and everybody I've missed a very Merry Christmas, a Holy Christmas, and a Happy New Year. We'll see you in January. And without objection, our meeting is adjourned. However, the board will meet in closed session to discuss real property decisions under some legal guidelines. Thank you all. Good evening.
Thank you very much.
Good night.